Welcome to The Long Way Through Scripture. I'm Catherine Schaefer. This is a slow walk through the Bible, not rushed or pressured, just one section at a time, letting it unfold as it does. Each week, we're not trying to master Scripture. We're simply learning how to stay with it a little longer than we normally would. If you're following along and want something to help you process what you're reading, there is a companion workbook for this podcast. It's simple and steady, just something to help you reflect and stay grounded as you go. You can find it in the show notes or through the website. But it's there if you want it, not something you have to keep up with. I'm really glad you're here, so let's begin. We are week 20, Isaiah 1 through 39. By the time we arrive at Isaiah, the story feels different almost immediately. We are no longer walking primarily through kings and battles or watching leadership rise and fall from chapter to chapter. Instead, we enter the words of a prophet, someone speaking into a world that is already unstable, already drifting, already carrying consequences that have been building for a long time. And honestly, Isaiah can feel intimidating at first. It's one of those books where people often open the first few chapters, feel slightly confused, quietly close it again, and think, maybe this is for spiritually smarter people. I want to say this right away. It's not. You don't need a theology degree, 12 highlighters, and a wall covered in Bible timelines to stay with this book. Isaiah asks us to listen more than anything else. And the first thing you notice is the tone. Isaiah speaks with urgency because the people have become disconnected from what once held them together. Outwardly, there's still worship happening. The rituals are still there. The sacrifices continue. On the surface, things look religious enough. But underneath it, something deeper has been lost. This is one of those threads that runs through all the opening chapters. God is not interested in appearances disconnected from relationship. The issue isn't simply that the people stopped showing up. The issue is that their lives no longer reflect what they claim to believe. Justice has been neglected. The vulnerable are overlooked. Worship continues, but hearts have drifted somewhere else. That lands a little uncomfortably because it feels surprisingly familiar. It's easy to assume spiritual drift always looks obvious, loud, or rebellious, but sometimes it looks much quieter than that. Sometimes everything on the outside still appears fine, while something important underneath has started to wear thin. Isaiah speaks directly into that reality. And yet, even with the sharpness in his words, there's something deeply hopeful woven underneath everything he says. He doesn't speak because restoration is impossible. He speaks because return is still available. And that matters. Because if you read Isaiah too quickly, it can feel heavy from beginning to end. Judgment, warnings, consequences, nations rising and falling. But underneath all of that is a steady invitation back toward relationship. Early in the book, there's a vision of what God intends for his people that feels almost startling compared to everything surrounding it. Images of peace begin appearing, justice restored, things made right again. It's as though Isaiah keeps lifting the people's eyes beyond what they currently see to remind them that the story isn't ending where they think it is. There's also one moment in particular that tends to stand out. It's Isaiah's own calling. In chapter 6, he has this overwhelming encounter with God in the temple. The language becomes vivid, weighty, bigger than everyday life. Isaiah suddenly becomes deeply aware of himself, his own limitations, unworthiness, and there's this honest moment where he realizes he doesn't quite belong in the holiness standing in front of him. But what happens next feels important. He isn't dismissed, cast aside. He's prepared. And then comes that famous response: "Here am I, send me." It's one of those verses people quote often, but when we sit inside the moment a little longer, we realize Isaiah isn't volunteering for something easy. He's stepping into a calling that will involve saying hard things to people who may not want to hear them. And that part feels strangely relatable too. Sometimes faithfulness means telling the truth with compassion, even when it's uncomfortable. Sometimes obedience looks less like applause and more like persistence. As Isaiah continues, the political tension surrounding Judah grows stronger. Kings are trying to figure out alliances, nations are threatening war, fear is spreading, and people are looking everywhere for security. Military power, political strategy, outside help, anything that feels stable enough to hold on to. And this becomes another important thread in Isaiah. Where do people turn when things feel uncertain? Because Judah keeps looking sideways instead of upward. They place confidence in political arrangements while slowly neglecting the relationship that once grounded them. Again, this feels more familiar than we sometimes want to admit. Most of us don't build altars to foreign gods in our backyard, thankfully, because honestly, the HOA would probably have questions. But we do place trust in things that feel measurable, visible, easier to control. Plans, money, success, approval, certainty. None of those things are automatically bad, but Isaiah keeps gently exposing what happens when those things become the center instead of God. The warnings continue through these chapters, but so do these glimpses of hope that feel almost impossible considering everything happening around them. There are passages that point towards someone coming, someone who will carry peace differently, lead differently, restore differently. If you've spent time around church, some of these verses may already sound familiar because they're often read around Christmas. A child born, a ruler carrying peace, light entering darkness. Isaiah doesn't fully explain everything yet, but he keeps planting these reminders that God is still moving toward his people, even when they are struggling to move toward him. The middle part of this section also carries stories involving King Hezekiah, and his chapters feel different from what surrounds them. Unlike many kings before him, Hezekiah generally seeks God during moments of crisis, when powerful threats surround Jerusalem and fear feels justified. He turns toward prayer rather than panic. That doesn't mean the situation instantly becomes easy. It simply means he remembers where help actually comes from. And there's something grounding about those chapters because they show what dependence can look like in the middle of uncertainty. Not perfect confidence or pretending fear isn't real, just the honest decision to bring fear before God instead of letting fear become the thing that drives every decision. Even so, Isaiah doesn't pretend that good moments erase deeper realities. The consequences of generations of drift are still present. There are warnings about exile, about what is coming if things continue as they are. And yet, as this is important, Isaiah never lets hopelessness fully settle in. Every warning sits alongside the possibility of redemption. Hard truth exists beside the reminder that God has not abandoned his people. As you read Isaiah 1 through 39 this week, don't worry about understanding every detail perfectly. Honestly, if you finish this section and think, okay, I understand 70% of that and politely nodded through the rest, you're doing just fine. Pay attention to the rhythm underneath it. Notice the tension between warning and hope, how often God keeps reaching toward people who have drifted, the repeated invitation to return. The reflection to carry with you this week is simply this. Sometimes the places that need healing most are the ones that still look fine on the outside. So Isaiah reminds us that God is not interested in polished appearances, disconnected from relationship. He wants honesty, attention, hearts willing to turn back even after long seasons of drifting. Sit with the discomfort where it shows up. Sit with the hope, too. Let both exist together because Isaiah holds them side by side without rushing to resolve either one too quickly. And that is where this part of the journey leaves us, standing in the middle of warnings, promises, uncertainty, and the steady reminder that even when people wander, God continues speaking. So as you move into the reading this week, remember, there's no rush. Read slowly, read a little at a time, or simply sit with the passages if that's what the week allows. Scripture doesn't ask us to perform, it invites us to remain. Everything connected to this journey lives in the show notes. It's all there in one place, so you don't have to go looking for it. And thank you for walking this long way with me. And I'll meet you here again next week.